Everybody, again, the Coffee Talk. We have an amazing Coffee Talk today put on by the Vision Council. So we'll talk about introducing reopeneyecare.com, getting back to business. And we have an amazing moderator here today, the coolest optometrist I know, Mr. Gary Gerber. Gary, how's it going?
I am doing fine. Wow, thanks for the introduction. Never been called that before, but that's okay. Well, a lot of stuff.
You're wearing an AC/DC t-shirt. You have a Jimi Hendrix poster in the back. I would say that's the coolest optometrist I know.
Well, it's a corporate gig, so I got dressed for work.
There you go. Excellent, excellent. Well, Gary, I'm going to turn it over to you, and you can go ahead and take us into this panel.
Yeah, thanks, Taryn. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for everybody joining us. I'll give you a quick little bio of who I am and why I'm here. I'm an optometrist. I might not look like one, but I am one, and I did have my own practice for a long time in northern New Jersey, great state of New Jersey. I'm now in sunny San Diego. Great place to spend the COVID apocalypse is in San Diego. So, a couple of years ago, like maybe 20 years ago, started a consulting company called The Power Practice, and we have been knee deep in COVID survival and reopening and staying opening with our doctors. Company's called The Power Practice. You can learn about us on powerpractice.com. I do a weekly radio show called the Power Hour right here from the Power Hour studio. So that's me. I'll tell you, just kind of reiterate the format. If you have questions as we go along, hit the raise your hand button by participants or throw up in the chat room. Either one is cool. We'll keep it conversational. It's not a lecture. There are no slides. This is not a COPE CE event, and there's no test and there's no questions. But you got to pay attention because it's really important, and this will be a good place to, Terrence, I just realized I have a Who coffee mug, so I have a lot of rock memorabilia in this room.
I'm jealous.
So it's really important that you kind of pay attention and stay caffeinated because it is a really important topic. We're going to be talking about reopeneyecare.com. My dog loves the site, by the way. Okay. reopeneyecare.com is the website. We're going to talk about that. Where did it come from? How to use it? What's the benefit? And we'll kind of take it away from there. I'll give you kind of overload of the site, and I'll just put it up so you can see it while I'm talking about it. This is it. And the genesis of the site really was, do I have to admit people to the room? They can come in by themselves, right? I'll just hit admit. So it's an inclusive group.
Yeah, you're good. You're good, Gary. We've got a few people that are admitting on the back end.
Popping up if I should admit them. So the genesis of the site really, and the intent was that as COVID kind of percolated up, we were besieged by information from multiple sources. And it was kind of like Roberto Duran, like no mas. Like I can't take this. There's information every place. It's on my phone, it's on TV, it's on a computer. What's good intel, what's bad intel, what do I do with it? How do I assimilate it? How do I explain it to my staff? What do I do about my business? Then we had the flood of acronyms with PPE and PPP and the CARES Act and the HHS kind of rebates, and it just got really insane. So what happened with the genesis of the site was that 9 of us got together, originally 9, I believe. We're up to 10 now, I think, who are essentially entrepreneurs from we're all industry guys, different entrepreneurs. And to deal with the information overload and get it out to the industry quickly, knowing that there's going to be pressure to get open safely, efficiently, and profitably, and people had the fear of missing out, FOMO, on information, we got together and we committed, let's do this quickly, and let's curate information through each of our individual entrepreneurial filters. And you saw on the site across the top, there were different areas, and we've each kind of divided up different areas of expertise where we think we can take information. It's not a commercial site. You're not going to see Power Practice logos or David Freefeld's Clear Vision logo or David Schute's Thin Optics logo. That's not what it's about. It's about getting the information, getting good information out there in a non-biased, non-commercial way to help our optical, optometry, ophthalmology brethren and sisterin to get through this mess. So that's why we have it. As far as our guests tonight, you're all the guests, so feel free to opine with questions. We have myself moderating the two Daves. You see their names up there. We have Dave West Coast and Dave East Coast. Dave West Coast is from Thin Optics. Dave East Coast is from Clear Vision. So let me start with Dave East Coast. So Clear Vision is it's a frame company, and it's got a long family legacy. You're busy, you got a lot of employees, you got a business you got to run. You said something on one of our task force calls. We call the 10 people working with us the task force. We were speaking, and I think your son said something like it was a Saturday, and you were doing task force reopen eye care stuff, and your son said to you, Dad, shouldn't you be out there saving your company instead of dealing with this?
Yeah.
So what's your personal mojo reason? Why do you want to get involved with this? You and the two Daves were kind of some of the initial instigators of this, of getting this going. What's like your personal reason? Because I know you got other stuff you got to do beyond curating all this gazillion, articles of content. So take it away, Dave East Coast.
Okay, well, I have a personal interest generally in, what's going to happen in the future. And for some of you guys that have been at the Vision Expos, for the last 6 or 8 years, I've been doing a lot of, future trends happening now, kind of what's going to happen going forward. And when the COVID virus came out, I actually looked back at the first text I sent to one of the guys that's on the group. It was on April 14th. So it was probably about 3 weeks in to where everything started happening. And I got together, it was actually Jim McGran, and we were just talking about things generally about the industry and how we were being impacted. And from that particular idea about what was going to happen, what do we think was going to happen, where the challenges were, we thought, gee, there must be other people like us thinking the same way. So my personal interest is more about how do we prepare the industry, the community, for what's going to be happening over a period of time. And back then in early April, most of us still didn't have a lot of information, and the information that we got was very conflicting. And as you said, Gary, we were being bombarded by Twitter, by emails, by private companies, by television. Every different place we were going was just COVID, 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 and a lot of it was conflicting. A lot of it was hard to digest. And I discussed that with, some of the early guys that week. We didn't know we didn't know what we wanted to do, but we agreed, let's meet on the following Monday and see if there was something that we could do that would make it easier for all of us and easier for all of the community members. So everyone that's on a call tonight, I looked at a lot of these names. There's a lot of industry here. There's a lot of doctors here, a lot of interested people. And all that we were trying to do in the very beginning was to make it easy for all of us. And that was the beginning meeting. And then, of course, it evolved into Reopen Eye Care. On a selfish level, obviously everyone on this call is involved in eye care. And not only is eye care extremely important, and as we know, each year that goes by, even greater scope of practice, and even more important in healthcare generally. But this is how all of us make our living. So to ensure that the industry, from a medical side, from the retail side, was strong, that became part of my initiative. And what I did say to my son that day, which we've all heard, is a rising tide lifts all boats. So if in fact the community is healthy, then everyone here is equally healthy, including my own company. So that was really my initial thought process when I called Jim that Monday.
Okay, Dave West Coast from Thin Optics, same sort of question. You deal with nonprofits, you deal with for-profits. You got a lot of stuff going on. There's other things you could do. You have a library of books behind you that you probably haven't gotten to yet. So you have other stuff you could do during the COVID vacation, right? But you chose to get involved with this, creating incredible spreadsheets and cash flow analysis and things that take a lot of time to do. So why do this?
I'll have to ask my therapist, I suppose. But, you know, I think this is an incredibly unique industry. I stumbled into it in the mid to late 80s as part of an invention in eyewear that led to starting a company, then selling a company, and sort of being here since then. And I jokingly call it the La Brea tar pit of industries, because once you get into this industry, you just never leave. Or it's like Hotel California.
California.
Yeah, exactly, for a musical metaphor. But I think it's by choice because, you know, first off, the industry gives people sight. I mean, how great is that, right? So at its core, it's making the human condition better. And then as you spend time in the industry, it actually is a place where the good guys and good girls actually can do well. And the people that cut corners don't do well. And you realize over time that many of your best friends you happen to work with, or maybe they're even competitors. So when East Coast Dave and Jim McGran, who have become lifelong friends just by getting to know each other, began sort of thinking out loud about this, you know, massive event smacking our industry, and you know, you start thinking about, well, how do we even think about this? You know, on an intellectual level, you realize this could wipe out a lot of businesses because it could last months and years. It's going to suppress demand and sales, and unless businesses understand how to manage and navigate the journey, they could run out of cash well before economic normal conditions return. So some of it was just how can we help out, you know, 25, 30,000 independent practices think about this and respond in the right way. There was a Darwin quote that, you know, Darwin looking at the evolution and survival of species. It's not the strongest or the smartest or the fastest species necessarily that survive over the long haul. It's those that are most able to adapt. And we realized that you know, adapting to this harsh economic environment, which is going to last for a while, was critical. So we thought, you know, what can we do to sort of help that? And that's sort of the professional side of things. On the personal side of things, you know, many of us are of a certain age. And we actually, you know, went to AC/DC concerts, and you start to begin to build friendships with people in the industry, many of which who've, you know, they're running their own optical outlets. And many of us, in fact, most of us that were part of the original group, they're either part of family businesses like Clear Vision or Rosen Eye Care. They've been entrepreneurs and started companies. I've done that most of my career. They run large businesses, but they're general managers that depend on just running companies and businesses. So, you know, there's a personal skin in the game kind of thing, which is wanting to help as many people through this as possible. There's no for-profit motivation whatsoever. It's all, you know, can we fight this thing in a successful way and go the journey? And final comment was, the principle for this site was, can we pull together useful, meaningful, actionable materials and insights curated from a bazillion different sources? David talked about, you know, so much stuff coming at you. Organize it in some sort of self-help kind of way that as we navigate the journey from, oh my God, I'm shut down, can I survive, to can I stabilize my sales? Can I lay the foundation to regrow back? Can I invest in what's growing and pivot to sales that are new and live with the sales that have fallen away? Can I ultimately invest in growth and eventually get back to thrive? As that journey unfolds over months, can we think about putting the right kind of tools and information and insights into place to help everyone kind of navigate and negotiate that, given their own individual personal circumstances? So that was the kind of animating thought process. And it gave us more stuff to do at 2 in the morning and on Sunday afternoon when we had extra spare time.
Yep. I think one of the important things that you said for people watching is that, yeah, it's called reopeneyecare.com, And this crisis that we're in, it's probably not going to be over when the PPP money runs out. So it is going to be, as you just said, it's going to be ongoing process. It could be months, it could be a couple of years. And with that, the intent of the site from the bottom up was to have it currently churn where the better material comes up to the top. So if you're here, when you visit the site, don't just come once, like come back, and we're going to do our best to keep it relevant with whatever's going on at the moment. I mean, one of the things we're dealing with right now with the PPP stuff is maybe today or tomorrow, the 8-week period may be extended, hopefully. The 75-25 payroll rent may be reduced to 60-40 or 50-50. And when it happens, we're going to scramble to get good clarity under the kind of financial section. And the next week, it could be something different. So it's, yes, it's Reopen Eye Care, but to Dave Westco's point, it's going to be a long slog, a long journey, siege, as I've heard you call it. And it's going to have to be reopen eye care, stay open eye care, and make eye care great again without being political, but be profitable. Let's get back to the mojo we had of really being able to focus on patients instead of like, where do I get surgical masks from? So it is going to be a process, and the site is going to hopefully evolve with those sequence of events, whatever they may be.
Can I just jump on that for just a second, just to add a bit? When the world changes as fundamentally as it has changed, right? And if it's only for a few weeks and it goes away, it's like a light switch, it's not that big of a deal. But if it changes fundamentally and that lasts for months, and this is going to last for months, right? Because until humans feel that it's safe to resume normal activity, there's going to be a suppression of demand, and you're going to have to, socially distance. And eye care is a contact sport, and you're close to eyes. You're going to not be able to refract as many people per hour, et cetera. So the business gets impacted. When that happens, just all this information comes at you, and you can't see the forest from the trees, and it's easy to become very disoriented. And one of the most important things is to create a mental map of over time and space of where am I going and how do I get there. So there are a couple presentations to help think through how do we negotiate this thing, and what are some principles we bring to bear to get through this. Having started companies before or run companies that ran into difficult economic times, you start to realize that one of the first principles is, just like blood is necessary for life, cash is necessary for business survival. So managing cash through each stage is critical. And it's not just a binary, I'm open, I'm not open kind of thing. It's when I'm open, I've got to make sure that, pre-crisis, I made some amount of profit. I had some amount of cost of goods. I had some amount of fixed costs. My gross margin was sufficient to cover my fixed costs. So I made some money. When I reopen, my sales are going to be lower. If I don't adjust my fixed costs, I'm going to start losing money, and I could lose a lot of money. 80%, according to Jobson, 80% of the ECPs have less than 2 months of working capital in the bank. That's not a lot of money. So you have to manage cash as you go from just a survival kind of thing to investing in growth to get to a point where you can become at least break even or cash flow positive again. So some of what we're trying to do is think about not only how do I get PPE, or how do I process a loan, or how do I communicate with patients, and et cetera. It's also, how do I think about this from a business perspective and address the fact that my demand is lower than it's been ever. It's going to be a while to grow back. I've got costs I've got to manage and get in line with sales, so I can do this journey over probably months. And I think it's a doable thing to navigate, but you got to think about the right things and ask the right questions and focus on the right issues.
David Freefeld, want to come over the top with anything to add there?
Yeah. Actually, I think Dave, your original question was how did this what's the genesis? And I think there's one more part of this that I would add. In addition to what Dave said, strangely enough, when we did start this, it was really a conversation, and I want everyone to understand that it was not. We did not intend to start a website or a business or anything. We were all looking for answers from each other. And I remember this one night, because Dave mentioned there were a lot of Sunday nights that he and we were thinking to ourselves, what are we doing? And it was late on my side because he's on the West Coast. But I remember one night we were looking at some numbers together, and we were talking about how many eye exams weren't going to be done in the month of April, how many were not going to be done in May, what kind of money this would take for unemployment. And we were running into the billions of dollars. We were looking at what, Dr. Fauci was saying on television. We were saying, my God, there's going to be many more, fatalities than are being, and we just started to look at these numbers. And I remember running to my dining room table and saying, Dave, I got the same exact numbers you had, and I've been tracking them for weeks. And I pulled it in here and we began to talk about it. So, when we started talking, Gary, you were part of those original guys. I think there was 8 of us in the original group. We really didn't know where this was going to evolve. And then somebody did say a website would be the best way that we can get current information to everybody, rather than because we were all being overloaded with emails. And to be fair, there were other sites that were available, but sometimes those sites would focus on one area. Even Clear Vision, had something that we were talking about. It wasn't as comprehensive as we have now. I do think the point that you made, Gary, is where we're going right now. We understand that after we, quote unquote, reopen eye care in whatever phase this is going to be, the challenges will be very different in 3 months. Very, very different. Dave and I were talking about this earlier. What happens when money runs out, when the government is not going to be funding things? That's going to change a lot of business. And what's going to happen when everyone is selling online, which will happen? Everyone's going to be selling online. The surveys that we looked at for optometrists was only 25% had any online presence. Very little were doing telemedicine. Only 1.5% were doing virtual try-on technology. All of that is going to dramatically change in the next 6 to 12 months, dramatically. And just the other day, we were talking on our weekly meeting. We meet like once or twice a week. And somebody said, we need to look at the next couple of evolutions of the site and of the information so we can help people at various stages. And Dave, for example, recently sent something to me that would show 5 stages of what he would call recovery, from the very beginning until the very end, when we're back to some version of normalcy. And when we get back to normalcy, which it will be a normal, but it won't be the normal we left on March 13th. So, we don't know where the site will go. We've already done some other things by involving more people. That was something we realized early on, that we need more people involved, and we encourage others to, reach out to us. There's ways to do that on the site. So I'm very enthusiastic about the group and where we go forward. But to be clear, it'll be something that evolves almost week to week as the market conditions change, and they will.
Yeah, if you're coming in here late, thanks for joining us. If you have a question, you can hit the participant thing on the bottom, hit the raise your hand, and we can do it that way. You can put something in the chat room. I want to show you, just again, if you came in late, if you haven't seen the site, this is it. And you'll see across the top here, it says the landscape. This is the kind of where are we, kind of how do we get here sort of thing. And you'll see this is kind of the journey all the way across. Financing, where's money going to come from? What are the actual mechanics, steps? So if we just kind of click on that one, for example, we can open it up. Then you can see things like marketing, eye care industry things. There's a list of all the stuff over here. So there's a lot of stuff here that we've taken the time to vet. And as Dave East Coast said, if you want to share something, we don't it's not like ownership of the site. The Vision Council was incredibly generous in helping us to get this thing together really, really quick with their tech people, a lot of smart people, and having it have a good user interface and all that sort of stuff. But we want it to be inclusive. So if you want to shoot us some content, if you go up here where it says contact us, you'll see there's an email that comes up right over, you can figure it out. It says right over here, info@divisioncouncil.org. Send it out. We'll kind of put it through our filter of our guys. We also created just recently, I don't think it's done yet, we have an advisory board to make sure the stuff we put up is really relevant and content and actionable and timely and all the things that we are trying to do. So we have got a couple of ODs, MD, optician that are there. Justin Manning from HEA is kind of chairing that part of it. So we want to make sure we put out there is not something that we as industry guys think is relevant. Now, that said, there are industry people here. And as Dave Shute said, it is really kind of Hotel California. It's kind of amazing to look through the list of participants and just kind of know so many of you guys. It's kind of cool, actually. So 113 people, I think I know more than half of you, which is kind of neat. But yeah, so there will be industry things there also. So for the industry guys listening, if you have content, it's a cliche at this point that we're in this together, but we are in it together. So we kind of have no choice, but to be in it together is my perspective. The chat just popped up. Let's see if that's a question or that's a link. Okay. Yeah, if you have questions, throw them in the chat room. David Freefeld, long history of Clear Vision. You ever had anything either in the company, personally, where you had to like, oh my God, I gotta like change everything. I gotta retool, I gotta regroup, I gotta redo, I gotta change my business mojo. I gotta do it now. And I got a really short amount of time to do it, which is kind of like the COVID thing, like figure it out quick and get it done quick. It's ever happened before? You have any experience doing anything like this before?
I don't think my relevant experience would be for emergencies or crises. So, there always were things that came up that were business challenges. We've changed our business a couple of times. One time in the early part of our business, the company, for the most part, I wouldn't say we ran out of cash, but we were pretty close to running out of cash because we had some poor bookkeeping, and that would go back to prior to the 90s. Company was expanding very fast. We didn't have the right bookkeeping. You get a lot of inventory in, you don't do things right, you don't run your LCs right, and all of a sudden you think you have money in the bank, but you don't. That was not an easy time. I think the toughest time we had where there was a crisis that is similar to this, but it was much more short-lived. During Hurricane Sandy, which many of you remember, we had a sales meeting planned exactly like the week after. And I was actually in Hong Kong when this happened. So between being in Hong Kong, the hurricane coming, thinking I was going to land in New York and then take off to the sales meeting, all hell broke loose. And the short version, without going into details, was on Long Island, we had no electricity. So our office was closed. Everything was planned. If you guys remember, there were no airplanes, there was no travel. We were trying to coordinate 80 people around the country, plus 20 people in New York, plus our guests. In fact, I think Marge, who's on the call, she was our guest, one of our guests at the meeting. So she will remember this. We had to put everything together in 2 or 3 days. We were driving around Long Island in our cars, trying to find cell spots that would be able to communicate with each other. And our phones were being charged in the cars because no one had electricity in their house. No one had heat. My house was 55 degrees. I mean, it was a crazy time, but it was a week. It was a week. The pressure and stress that we all are under right now, it actually multiplies week after week. And what we're faced with is so different based on the information changes. So I would say, in fairness, I don't think I faced anything like this. We've had some, again, 2008, difficult business time. Changing business licenses, difficult business time. But most cases you could prepare. In this case, Friday, March 13th, I went into our CFO's office and I said, our numbers are wrong. She said, what do you mean? I said, sales can't be up 50% for a company our size. It's impossible. Something's wrong. And the month of March, we were up 50% for the first 2 weeks. It was crazy. And I think, by the way, many of the people on the call would know this too. Optometry was having a crazy, great month. And of course, the next week, everything changed. So I don't think personally I've faced anything like this, although the challenges I've had pieces of it, just pieces.
Yeah. Dave Shute, anything? I mean, you got a lot of entrepreneurial experience. Anything happened like this before?
Yeah, I may be more the glutton for punishment / adrenaline junkie. that has done some of this stuff before. At the risk of dating myself, in the mid 1980s, not 1880s, but 1980s, I started getting involved with a guy that was trying to adapt nitinol, which is a shape memory alloy, to eyeglass frames. It eventually became Flexon. So that led to about a 3.5, 4-year journey and a $3 million loss to eventually get it to the point where we had eyeglasses made out of what became Flexon. In the process of that, we bought Universal Optical, a company in Rhode Island. This is now late 80s. And Universal Optical company in Boston. These had been huge US-based manufacturers before the US got killed by European manufacturers. We tried to combine them and bring just-in-time manufacturing to the business, and we were doing a turnaround from massive loss. They were essentially bankrupt. So anyway, there was a couple-year turnaround there. So when you can't make payroll week to week to week, you start to learn how to really manage a business. And then when you're trying to start a company, you try to learn how to manage a business, always living on the edge because you could run out of money or what you're doing isn't working. And then since that time, I had a company I sold to Marchand, and Flexon went to $100 million over 13 years, and Marchand grew by a factor of 7. And then I've been starting companies since then, all in eye care. When you're building businesses, there is no certainty. It's just a world of uncertainty. So you just start to get used to sort of this pattern recognition of this is a world of uncertainty, right? And so you learn that you need a different set of skills, which is, I can't do everything. There's a finite amount of time. There's an infinite number of issues. How do I focus on the limited number of issues that have to get done? And it's better to do a few things right than a lot of things wrong. So in the case of this situation, we're going to reopen, but demand is going to be suppressed. Consumers and patients are going to be a little bit fearful. I have a friend who has a practice in Manhattan. He has 3 ODs that did 6 refractions per hour each. Now they have 1 OD doing 2 an hour. And that's a fundamental change to your economic model, right? Trying on 60 frames and having to clean each one to prevent COVID-19 from going nose to nose to nose, that's an issue, right? How do you get your workers into the practice? So these are all solvable problems, but you got to work the problem and work the issue that's in front of you at the time. So, again, I think it's a series of stages. The initial beginning of this journey is a survival issue. Get as much cash as you can, borrow as much cash as you can, limit money going out as much as you possibly can to have at least 6 months of cash on hand, hopefully more. Then when you get your business stabilized, your sales would be lower than they were going into this. So your fixed costs have to be adjusted. Your gross margins have to be adjusted. You may still have cash loss, but hopefully you're minimizing it so your months of cash on hand still last. Eventually you have to start innovating. The first moves are very defensive and they're very almost reptilian. You just got to act fast and survive. Eventually you can start innovating and saying, okay, can I do evaluations through telehealth? Can I use the internet to communicate with my patients more? Can I think about surviving in a world where I don't have a waiting room, but I can text somebody waiting in their car? Can I stimulate demand that's been lost because people do need eye exams, et cetera? And so there's an innovation test and learn component to this thing, which is more offensive and creative to make up for the lost sales. So you're playing an offensive game of how do I grow my business in new areas, and a defensive game of how do I minimize cash loss. You have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You have to be operating outside your comfort zone and try stuff. And nobody's smart enough to get the answers all right. So you got to try things, and if they don't work, you quickly shut it down, and then you try and experiment someplace else. And then when you find what's working, that email worked. That was great, whatever it is. Then you double down, you do a lot of it, right? In the process of all that, you got to keep your head straight. You got to think calm, cool, deliberate, methodical, organized. You can't do hair on fire stuff. And then, there's this distinction between leadership and management. We're all taught to be managers, but our people and our customers want leaders. And you got to be a wartime general, or some other metaphor that doesn't involve war. But you got to get everybody through this thing. And there are going to be some casualties. There's going to have to be some furloughs. My friend who has the practice on the Upper East Side, all the partners have their salary. In my company, I cut my pay. We cut senior manager pay. We reduced salaries and hours to preserve the maximum number of jobs. And you just got to over communicate to your patients, communicate to your customers, communicate to your employees, and you got to be authentic and you got to be real, and you can't fake it. Nobody wants fake. This is time to be authentic and real, and you got to work the problem. And good organizations, well led, with good people that are focused on solving the issue and getting their way through, and are very intellectually honest. Hey, I did the wrong thing. Fine, forget it. Do it different next time. It's those skills that get you through this kind of thing.
Dave, East Coast, when you mentioned Hurricane Sandy, I was on the East Coast living through that. And I think you're right. I mean, it was horrible. I remember doing the same thing, was home freezing, sitting in the car, charging my cell, driving around Jersey, I remember all that. And I think you hit on a key difference. We knew that was going to have an end. We didn't know exactly when, but it probably was not going to go on for months. And we said, probably maybe by the end of next week, we'll have the power turned on. We'll have heat in my house. So we kind of had mentally that was coming. I think the big difference with this is we don't know when that's going to happen, if it's going to happen. And as you said, whenever it does happen, I think things will be fundamentally different than they were before. We're not going to just kind of revert back, and here we are. And the topic of telemedicine, I'm my other company, my myopia management company, now that we're doing telehealth follow-ups, it's like, man, why didn't we do this before? This is great. Patients don't want to come in. Like, absolutely. I should have done this 4 years ago when I opened. I just didn't think to do it. So I think there is a silver lining in retooling some of the thought process here. We are going to learn a lot, selling glasses online, selling contact lenses online, all that sort of stuff. I want to take another look at the site. Just somebody asked if we could just go a little bit deeper. Of course, we can do that. We have the technology for that because now we've all been zoomed out, Zoom meetings. I actually know how to do these things like sharing the screen. So this is the home page, and I can take you down to the, if you scroll down on the bottom right, you can see there's a thing here. It's called the cash flow calculator. Click on that because, as David said, and everybody said, cash is king, and the thing you don't want to run out of, that would be bad. If you're thinking of how do I spend my PP money to get to forgiveness, I think you need a little bit of therapy. It should be, how do I hang on to that money? So I'll just kind of leave it at that. And you can kind of type in the numbers here. I'll just make something up here. $1 million. Let's put down 30%. Here's your gross profit. Estimated percentage of sales. How much are you going to lose? Let's say, I don't know. To guess. Your guess is as good as mine. I'm a magician and a mentalist, and I do have a crystal ball that I can show you here. Because people always question, it's really heavy. Do I really have one? Yes, I do. But I don't know how much business we're going to lose. Oh, this thing is heavy. Boom. Okay. So I'm going to go with, what did I pick here?
55%.
55%. So you see the numbers work out. You put in your other numbers here, yada, yada. And you'll come up with how much cash flow you're going to have left. And it's, given that if you're not careful with managing your fixed expenses and your top line decreases, like Dave West Coast said, you're going to be in a world of hurt pretty quickly, and you're not going to keep your door open. So I want to, yes.
I might want to add something where Dave left off and where you just were talking. I may get into the area of opinion here, so I'm going to try to do it the best I can to use facts. We have a very interesting industry relative to most others, where the majority of at least eye exams and still probably frames are sold by independent practitioners, professionals, small business people. And I can remember in speaking with a number of my customers early, many of them many of them did not even have line of credit. I'd say at least 50% didn't have a line of credit. And it's because, for the most part, as professionals, they paid off their college loans or, optometry loans. They paid off this, they paid off that, and they were running a nice business, which for the most part is demand driven by the fact that people can't see. You can't see, want to come in. Have something in my eye, want to come in. Age-related issues want to come in. Right now, what Dave said, what he last said and what you said are two critical facts. One, Dave said that leadership and management will be critical. Well, to be fair, when business is relatively easy, not only for optometrists, for me and for Dave both, for Jim McGran, for Marty, for yourself, when business is easier, leadership isn't stressed as much and management isn't stressed as much, and we can get away with a lot more. One of the great things on the site is a section on leadership and management and staffing, which I think is critical. It's a critical part of the site. The second part that you just mentioned, again, for the average OD, it's the person I've been selling. We've been doing this for 70 years. We actually still sell our first customer, still in New York. Our first customer still, it's a second generation business. For the most part, optometrists stay in business for a long time. And it's not that you can't go out of business as an optometrist, but it's a pretty stable business. And that meant our industry was pretty stable. What's happened now is it's completely unstable. It's really unstable. And I think your calculator proves that by putting in the numbers. And if you do the numbers, if you don't do the numbers, you will succumb to the numbers. So I think it's critical, again, not only that particular profit calculator that's there, but the sections on running your business and taking care of your business and marketing your business is very different. One of the things you mentioned, you keep on mentioning telemedicine. Well, what's interesting is the change that was made in reimbursement. So we all know that now we can be, our optometrists can be reimbursed for telemedicine calls. They never were able to be reimbursed for that. Personally speaking, that should be an issue that everybody wants to see going forward next year. Because right now, I think 12/31, the law might change or the reimbursements might change. So we want to make sure that happens for next year. Why? Because as you said, and I know because I've spoken to optometrists, a lot of patients would prefer to have their issue looked at this way, just like we're doing it. If it's conjunctivitis or something simple and I have to get in a car and travel 30 minutes, telemedicine will be great. Remote eye exams will be part of what we do. So the next part of what we're going to be facing, and it's, again, we've talked about it in our group, it's not on the site yet, but it will be part of the site, is what changes are going to happen real quickly. And unfortunately for optometry, and we've known this for many years, our group talks about it, meaning the community talks about it, we've been a little bit insulated. We haven't been rolled up like pharmacy. We haven't been rolled up like dentistry even. So we have a very big group of independents that are now going to be under pressure. And what's important is if those independents want to stay independent, they can have to avail themselves a little bit differently. Leadership and management become critical. Becoming more of a CEO of your practice is critical. And by the way, on the commercial side, we also know that they'll be under tremendous pressure too. If you're a commercial practice in a large mall, the way you do business is going to be completely different because mall traffic will be different. So our whole industry is going to change very rapidly. And part of what we'll be addressing on the site will be those rapid changes as things develop. But I can't encourage people enough to understand the CEO aspect of the business, what we call working on your business rather than in your business. It's very, very important now. It couldn't be more important than any other time in the history of optometry.
Yeah, there are some great articles on the leadership part of the site that I popped up very quickly while you were talking. So please take a look at those. Again, if you have any questions, pop them up in the chat room or hit the raise your hand.
If I could jump on the back of East Coast Dave's comments, it is important to highlight there's good news in this, right? This is going to end, right? There's 100, 120 million eye exams done in the country every year. It's suppressed for a period of months, but those eye exams are going to come back. The average ECP has 3, 4, 5, 6,000 people that regularly come back to them. They're going to need eye exams. They're going to need glasses. They're going to need contacts. There are ways to fulfill contacts remotely. There are ways to do evaluations remotely. Many ECPs have long-standing, very human relationships with people that will want them to succeed, and will lean into helping them survive, right? If they know that there's an issue. So there's an end to this. What we don't know is the length of time, the duration, and we don't know the depth of the economic hit, but there's an end to this. It's not like we all own Blockbuster video rental stores or Buggy Whip retail stores that just went away and never came back. So our task is to survive that journey. And I think some of the references that were made here by everyone is, David's point, be out of your business, managing and not in it. One of the useful things is to get outside your own practice and look at your practice like your customers and patients look at your practice. Why do they come to you or not? Why do they buy glasses from you or not? What is a pain in the neck for them, and how do you make it easier and better for them? What do they know and hear about you or not know and hear about you, right? And part of this process is when you react to change, like Darwin and the adapting species, is if you are open-minded and able to look at yourself from the outside and modify your business quickly and effectively, you can come out of this much better. Now, your comment about, hey, if stuff can be done online and it's kind of better for everybody, why not figure out that capability and then just do it going forward? Many times really great companies came out of the 1970s and 1980s and 1990s when there were tough economic times, because it forces you to look really hard at what does and doesn't work. So I think they're buried in all of this is good news. It'll end and you can come out of it better, and you just have to figure out your own individual strategy of navigating this journey from where we are now to where we've got a viable economic model that can ride out the storm.
I think it's important to recognize that, yeah, it's going to have an end, and are you going to do something now to make sure you're there to see the end and be viable? And I think by digging in deep into the site and participating with us and getting us content, I think that's one of there's a lot of tools out there. We're not saying ours is the best by any means. We're trying to make it kind of like a museum that does a exhibit on famous rock people. We want to curate the best rock pieces that are out there. So to that point, again, if you go and you hit the contact us button, you'll see an email link. If you stumbled on something, you created something yourself, we'll put it through the kind of task force filter, meat grinder, to see what comes out the other side, to see if it's not replicated with something else. Because it is, again, there's so much stuff out there, you don't want to have to read the same article 4 times from 4 different sources. Let's just pick one that really addresses it to save you time, so you can keep working on your practice and on your business. Let's see if we got any questions here. Dave, East Coast. So I guess we got like maybe 10 minutes if you don't have any questions. I got a really favorite quote from Jack Welch that I think really applies here. And Jack Welch, for those who don't know, he was the former CEO of General Electric, and kind of revered as a really smart CEO type of guy. A lot of good concepts. He did all the Six Sigma stuff, training, all sort of stuff. He had a quote that a small business is not a little big business. And he said that one of the big advantages of being a small business is you can move really quickly, is the first thing. And the second thing is you get to be wrong. And he used an example that when Coca-Cola decided to come out with new Coke, it was a disaster. And their stock tanked, they lost a lot of sales. They came out and they said, okay, we'll make classic Coke. And then people said, well, is that the Coke that was before, or is that a third one? And it was just a big mishmash. So a little naming mistake or a new product mistake really was disastrous. And the ECP's independent ECP practice, they have the ability now to do things, to make changes that they might not all work. And I always think about Jack Welch because we have this discussion with our clients all the time. And I'm like, well, what's like the worst that could happen? Just like try it. If it doesn't work, go back and do something else. So with regard to everything that's going on, and you having one of the bigger small companies out there in the frame world, how important is speed, being nimble, staying on top of things? You know, we're talking about things that change so quickly. Oh my God, don't get left behind.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because I think most business leaders and most of us in life prefer stability and certainty. Stability and certainty allows us to plan, and we can plan for a long time. At Clear Vision now, what we refer to as long-term planning is 5 days, and I mean that sincerely. We also ask people to trust us more. You know, the good news is that if you built up a culture of trust, people will trust you more. So it's important. Now, as far as speed and nimbleness, I've learned, and I want to say, you know, as a really positive to what we've been doing as a group, because many of us knew each other, as Dave mentioned. Some of us are friends, some of us know each other. In some cases, we were introduced to people. But what I've learned, and Gary, to be fair, if I give you the kudos, you would be the first person to say speed to market's more important than perfection. And that to me became part of our rallying cry. So when we put something up, this particular product, we knew we'd be making changes to it once we got feedback. We've already gotten feedback, you know, from a lot of industry people have talked to us and said, here's how this could be improved. Here's how I can contribute. For us, speed to market was important. For Clear Vision now, even though we're a small, big company, as you said, or a big, small company, I've looked at being fast to market as something that is important, and the idea of making mistakes is also important. I think Google's motto is fail fast. If it's not Google, it's somebody close to Google, someone like them. Fail fast, get it out, learn from it, and reiterate. And Dave's talked about that a lot. Dave's talked about iterating different things. So I think if your question is, do I think it's important? Yes, speed is important. Making mistakes important. Learning from those mistakes is important, and iterating, or dropping out of something. Part of this particular experience made me think about my own business, things that weren't profitable, I'm getting out of. And I think I would have held on to those things for way too long, way too long.
Okay. Dave, West Coast, anything? Speed, nimbleness?
Yeah, a lot of thoughts. No decision is a decision.
Yep.
Dithering and deer in the headlights is death. You got to act fast. You got to be decisive. You got to be bold. You got to make decisions. But there's two kinds of action. If you're on a rocking horse and you're moving a lot, you're not going anywhere. You're just rocking the horse, right? So a lot of unrelated tactical moves that aren't moving you to some clear objective is just a waste of energy, and it just probably accelerates demise. So there's got to be a mental understanding and a plan of what does success look like. You got to have a plan. How do I get out of this hole? How do I get across this chasm? How do I survive the storm, right? There's got to be an operating set of hypotheses about, okay, my exams are really low, my dispensing is really low, you know, how do I get my exams up? How do I get my margins up? When do I start dispensing? Do I go to some new customers because these other customers aren't, you know, buying from me? My margins are still 65%, but my fixed costs are too high. I got to cut my fixed costs. How do I do that? Do I work fewer days, few hours? There's got to be basically an animating plan about how I get out of this. And then in the context of that, hopefully correct view of what success looks like and what the journey is, you got to make a bunch of decisions. And, you know, I think the testing thing, test and learn. I do a lot of stuff online now. You can very quickly test. I mean, I can launch an email and in 5 minutes see sales per hour spike by 3 hours. It's harder in the physical world, but you can send some emails out, and if your open rates triple or your click-through rates triple, you're onto something, right? Or you can send out another email and nobody does anything. Well, that didn't resonate, right? So just change it the next day. But I think there's a need to really make bold, decisive decisions. It's also fair to realize nobody has all the answers, right? I make plenty of mistakes. You know, the thing is you got to figure out, are they mistakes? And going to a site like this site, maybe there is no one silver bullet. In fact, there is no one silver bullet, but it might spark some thoughts or some ideas, or adapt the cash flow calculator to your own circumstances in ways that are relevant, or call up a friend, or get 3 or 4 smart people that you respect and just work the problem over, drinks. God gave me eyes to plagiarize. Rip off as many good and best practices as you possibly can. Whatever works, do a bunch of it. And to Dave's Friedfeld's point, all sales are not good sales. There can be a lot of sales you actually lose money on, right? You did $100 of effort to get $20 of sales. You got to get rid of that, and do the reverse, which is spend $20 to get $100 of sales. But all this is kind of this issue of working the problem and making decisions and implementing those decisions well, doing more of the good stuff, and if it isn't working, just stop it and move on to something else.
Great. Guys, I think we're coming down to the gun lap here. Terrence,
Yeah, actually, Gary, Mike Hunter had a really good question. I'd like to unmute his microphone, and he's asking a question that he would love to get the 2 Dave's opinion on. Hey, Mike.
Hi there.
Hello, Mike.
Dangerous thing to do to unmute my mic.
Very dangerous. Big mistake.
Exactly. I was really interested to understand your particular points of view on the issue of whether leaders in companies should be taking a stand with respect to the social issues that are on the streets of Los Angeles today, and in front of optical shops and destroying them, as a matter of fact. Should a leader take the risk of probably pissing off a few people, maybe customers, losing some customers, in exchange for what it does for its reputation about empathy?
I'm happy to chime in, Dave. Start.
Please.
Yeah, I think it's very reasonable for everyone to expect, not only business leaders, because everybody on this call is a leader of some sort. As Gary pointed out, in Jack Welch's world, whether you're a business that's worth 500 billion or a business that's worth 500,000, one way or the other, you're a leader. And if you're a member of a family and the family is 2, you're a leader. So I don't think it's I don't think it's unreasonable at all for people to take a stand publicly on this. In fact, there's maybe a danger in not taking a leadership position. Now, that said, I will tell you that I've had a bunch of conversations with people in the industry that don't necessarily agree with me. I don't think there's a danger in taking a position that we would all agree to certain universal truths. A universal truth would mean everybody would agree with it. Would we all agree in social justice? Everybody would agree with that. Somebody would have a hard time saying, I'm against social justice. Somebody would have a hard time saying, I'm against violence. Somebody would have a hard time saying it. Now, while violence has a place in society, we know that. Our own country, if we go back to the Boston Tea Party, there was a violent act. So, there's going to be use for violence in society. There's no question about that. But nobody would say violence as a way of, nobody would agree that it's the best form, let's say. Nobody would agree with that. Nobody would agree that we shouldn't have a police force, and I assume, Mike, that's what you're talking about in terms of social justices. Nobody would disagree that we shouldn't have a police force that's fair and equitable to society. So those things are pretty easy. Where it gets hard,
here's my, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I would say where it gets hard is where people disagree, and you're right, somebody might tick off a customer. I can give you a personal example. So we had a license with Kenneth Cole. Kenneth Cole was very famous for putting out controversial advertising in the 1990s and early 2000s. And there were parts of the country where, regardless of my personal view or his personal view or the society's personal view, he would put something out there. And there's no question we would get calls from customers, because that was the second part of your question. Should leaders take a position that might tick off customers and ultimately hurt their business? We actually saw that. We saw that on a regular basis.
Well, here's an example. Nordstrom yesterday, I'm sure a lot of people got this same email from Nordstrom yesterday. I'll just read you the last few sentences. The events of this weekend are one more painful reminder that injustice remains in our world. We can fix the damage to our stores. Windows and merchandise can be replaced. We continue to believe as strongly as ever that tremendous change is needed to address the issues facing Black people in our country today. We strive to be a positive force for change in every community we serve. That is a specific stand that I have not seen many CEOs of companies take yet.
You mean to say in generally or in eyewear?
Today, yesterday, today, and what's going on in this particular crisis of this moment are CEOs standing up for their true values and what's important to the society. That's the question. And is there a moral obligation on the part of CEOs to do so, or should they just shut up?
So I'll you know, we all have opinions, right? And it's, and I may or may not get into trouble for this, but you know, I think coronavirus, if anything, has taught us it's about we, not me. We are all in this. It's cliche as hell, but if I breathe on somebody, they breathe on me, get me sick, and then I take it to my grandmother and she dies, we're all interconnected, right? And in this industry, we're all interconnected, and it's a fallacy to think that we're not. And we're a democracy, and the Constitution existed because there were 200 years of religious wars, and there were kings and autocrats that basically killed people that didn't agree with them. And the Constitution was set up so a very diverse group of people, in this case 330 million, can live together in peace. And if some minority is treated unjustly, systemically, constantly, forever, in unbelievably unfair ways, we all suffer. And there's some Benjamin Franklin quote, it's only when the unaffected feel as outraged as the affected does change happen. So, you know, yeah, we run a business or businesses, and yeah, maybe we should avoid really pissing people off with political positions. And I don't think you want to raise, you know, you don't want to get into a debate over the tactics of politics. But to Dave Friedfeld's point, the fundamental underlying human truths of what's right and being morally led, I think is a responsibility of all of us. And I don't know how you live your life and not bring that to business each day. Now, I don't think you should proselytize on vote for this person, that person, or whatever, but trying to make the world a better place, as corny as that sounds, I think it's our responsibility.
So Mike, I know we're running over a little bit of time. For those that you want to follow me on Twitter, you'll find
it's like every 12 minutes.
You'll find how I
that's
feel.
What you're doing during the day.
You'll find how I feel, what I post, and if I'm considered a business leader, then I would say my opinions are up there, my statements are up there, and yes. I have been called to task for some of them, so I'm not unwilling to do that. On a different, I'm speaking personally now. You know, my brother actually, Mike, this morning, I don't know if you saw that Nordstrom piece, but he actually texted me something like that, something like you just raised this morning. He said that, you know, Clear Vision should be more proactive in taking a position. So, you know, to be fair, and, you know, look, the proof is in the pudding for everyone. We all know each other. So we will all take a risk. We will all take a risk taking a position. There's no question about that. There's something in that statement that Nordstrom said. I listened to it carefully, but I'd have to look at it. Somebody could find issue with it. And if you don't mind 1 second, just with a story. This is a true story about Ford Motor Company. Many years ago, I'm going back to 1985. The marketing team gets together and they want to put out some version of a Christmas card. And Mike, to your point, okay, we want to have a Christmas card or a Christmas commercial. This is the beginning of, let's say, being aware for diversity. Somebody says not everyone's Christian, and we have to move it to a happy holiday. Some people don't celebrate holidays. Some people don't have family. Some people, gay people don't have, you know, went on and on and on and on. And at the very end, it was something like they get their card to look like a Ford Model T, and it said something like, have a nice day. And that's where we also have problems, where we want to say something, but we're afraid of offending everyone. And that's a challenge where we are in our society right now. So I think Nordstrom's, to be fair, what they said was pretty much down the middle. Not too many people could disagree with what they said, but there will be people that will say, I'll never shop in Nordstrom's again, which is what we found with Kenneth Cole. We actually found that when Kenneth Cole would say, you know, we're going to donate shoes to the homeless, you'd have people saying the homeless are there because it's their own problem. I'm not going to buy Kenneth Cole anymore. that's just part of it. That's part of being a leader. I think that's your question.
Well, Dave, I think that's a great place to wrap up here. Appreciate you sharing that and being brave enough to do so as well. We want to thank everyone for being here. Gary, thank you so much.
Thank
Dave,
you.
East Coast and West Coast, if you volunteer your time. For those of you, this is your first time coming to Coffee Talk. We do this every Wednesday at 12:15. And every week we have a different subject or topic of interest. Next week will be the topic here, the next generation of eyewear. We will be speaking with a few emerging millennials in the industry on the vendor and retailer side. We have Wes Study, founder of Article One, Garrett Light, creative director of Garrett Light Eyewear, Kylie, Zach Heim, Robin from Zach in LA, as well as Christos Karabalas, as well in Soma Optical in Boston. Now, as I mentioned in the chat by Olivia and Ashley, on June 17th, we have a very special coffee talk I'm very excited about. One thing that West Coast Dave said is that we are an industry that we give sight to people. So we can't be blind to what's happening right now in our world when it comes down to police brutality and the inequality that's facing the Black community. So really now more than ever, it's important that we as an industry strengthen our relationships with one another and examine where we stand when it comes to being an ally of diversity and inclusion. So on June 17th, we have a very special coffee talk entitled Open Your Eyes, How to Become an Ally of Diversity and Inclusion. This will be moderated by Dr. Danielle Richardson. Panelists will include Dr. Cheryl Reynolds, President of the National Optometric Association, Dr. Howard Purcell, President of New England College of Optometry, Coco and Breezy Dodson from Coco and Breezy Eyewear, and many more. So please put that on your calendar, 12/15, June 17th, for a very important discussion when it comes to how we all can become allies of diversity and inclusion. And more this week. So thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Marge. Thank you, Odin, again for being here as well. Dr. Ossip, thank you for being here. Mark Ferrara, we appreciate you. Mike Hunter, we appreciate you being here as well. And so many more. If I did not mention your name, it's not because we do not love you. It's just because there's over 170 of you here. We can't get to all of you. So enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you next Wednesday, Coffee Talk.
Thank
Signing
you.
off.
Adios.
Bye.
Bye.
Well done, gentlemen. Hey, Marge.
Bye, Marge.
I don't know if I'm supposed to stay on.
The after party is always nice.
Oh, that's great.
No, well done. Well done. You know, both of you, Dave, addressing that question in regards to making a statement. I think it's something that leaders definitely. Did you see the internal memo that Rick Gadd put out for Essilor? It was very powerful.
I didn't see it. No.
So they sent it over. I'll send it over to you as well. It's a really powerful statement that he
Right.
made.
You
as a
know,
leader.
I wish I had that story better memorized about the Ford Motor Company, which is hysterical because everybody in the meeting was afraid to say something like Merry Christmas. That's where it started, because somebody would be offended by Merry Christmas. And it's bizarre. And that's why I say, you know, I said this with a universal sense. There are a lot of things. Nobody would disagree that you should be nice to your parents. These are things that make a lot of sense. Unfortunately, right now, I think, and I'm old enough, Terrence, you're not. Dave, you remember 1966, 1967, 1968. Very tough time in the country. And the protesting went on for in many cases, quite over the summer. And most people on the call tonight or this afternoon don't remember that. I can remember that. And I remember where I lived was somewhat of a contentious area on Long Island. So it was a very interesting time period for me as a 12-year-old observing society. And my parents were very involved in the business. We had certain concerns generally, because I would say we were a more progressive employer at the time, and that it was a really strange time in their country, really strange time.
It's so now that we're off the clock, so to speak. So my daughter is 26 and she's unbelievably distraught about what's going on in this country. And even did that, do you want to bring kids into this world, right? And I said, well, yes, you do. But I cited the 1960s and 70s as, the human species goes through periods of horrifically bad decision making, Black Death, First World War, Second World War, Depression, you know, whatever. But back to this point, good people who have courage become leaders and get everybody through the mess. You know, Franklin Roosevelt, you know, fireside chats, Winston Churchill, fight the fascists, right? You know, that ultimately you've got to take a position on what's morally incorrect and unjust. Martin Luther King, eventually society bends to the good, right? And I think that your Ford Motor story, if you're so freaking afraid you're going to offend anybody, you're not going to do anything because you're always operating out of fear.
Which is worse.
If you're willing to take a stand, okay, maybe you piss some people off, but you also have take a principled position and you get much more loyalty out of those that stay. And I don't know, I'd rather lead my life that way, right?
Dave, you know that my son's working in Brooklyn at that, mask facility. He called me yesterday. And Terrence, my son's 26, 27 years old. He's working, leading an initiative to develop, to provide face shields to New York City.
Nice.
It's a tremendously diverse group of people he's working with. It's I think it's a tremendous experience for a young man to be there. He left work yesterday, Dave, just what you're saying, what your daughter, he had, I don't want to call it a panic attack, but he literally had to leave work. He said too much was going on in his head. He called me. I wasn't available, but he called me and then called my daughter to talk about it. He just said, all the things you just said, I'm so upset by what's going on. I'm so upset I can't be at work today. He actually took the afternoon off after about 3 o'clock, just couldn't stay. So the pressure that's on society is very difficult right now, very difficult.
It's very hard also not to just be at work, but to be present when things like this go on. One day I had a discussion with some other people in the Black eyewear community is, all this is going on, but, we still have to show up and be productive and be present and be animated at the same time when, at home, these discussions are happening all the time and now they're happening earlier. My son has an 8-year-old kid and he's like, I don't know what's happening. He's pulling his hair out because of things of this nature is happening. I have to have these discussions with my kid and at 7 a.m. I have to go punch a clock and work 12 hours a day. So these conversations, I think, is where it starts. We need to not shy away from these conversations in our industry. We need to welcome it and leaders especially need to be proactive of initiating these conversations so that employees feel comfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be uncomfortable, but we have to have those uncomfortable conversations until they get comfortable.
It takes it's very complex, obviously. This, by the way, had we started off and we said, hey, Dave Friedfeld, Gary Gerber, and Dave Shooter can discuss social issues for an hour. Honestly, I think it would have been a lot of fun. Having it at the last minute and trying to make a statement out of it is tough. But I can tell you, a number of years ago, locally, and I don't know if it was the rest of the country, but the Spanish community wanted to make a protest on May 1st, and this goes back. I can say it's actually more than a few years ago. I forgot. It's about 12 or 13 years ago. We had a small, let's say 20% of our population at the work was Hispanic. And now the question is, how do we balance that group's desires, needs, wants, amongst the other groups that are more or less, quote unquote, entrenched in suburbia here on Long Island? And, we took a position at the company that we would be favorable to that group. I had a meeting with everybody, the Hispanic community. I had a meeting with everybody in the company and explained why. But my own position is, and I don't think it will surprise many of you if I look at the last names, they're going to be different last names here. Our country is actually, as Dave said, our country is actually founded because other people couldn't be who they wanted to be somewhere else. And that means anybody who came after, any single person that came after, unfortunately, was second in. And if you go back through the history of prejudice or otherwise social inequity in our country, you'll find the Chinese Exclusion Act in 1882. You're going to find Catholics not allowed in Philadelphia, because they were Catholic and not Protestant. You're going to find so many Jewish people not allowed in a country club. There's so many. Our country is fraught with it. And that's why I look back and say, you're just the next guy in line. Now, to be fair, I understand, that certain groups in the country have taken it on the chin more than others. But basically, nobody would disagree with what we said before, that there should be social justice for everyone. And you wouldn't want to be in a society that doesn't allow that based on our Constitution. It's what they've said. Now, most people that are involved on the negative side are just afraid of losing power. And that's part of it. If you're afraid of losing power, you know, you're going to act a certain way. You act a certain way. By the way, Terrence, I've never attended one of these calls at Coffee Clutch.
They're cool, right?
Yeah, it's very cool.
Good.
And, you know, the chat on the side, it's hard because I didn't have my reading glasses on, but I was doing my best to chat a little bit.
I can have Dave West Coast send you a pair if you like.
I got so many. I have thousands.
But I think I will tell you, I was very impressed with this idea. I didn't participate in it before. I did see about 6 or 8 people from my company on. I noticed probably about a 50% match with names that people I knew. I like this idea a lot. Did it only come up because of COVID, or is it around from a previous time?
No, we literally, once the show was you know, canceled, we said, well, let's get engaged in the community. And honestly, I mean, Angie's on. We thought maybe we'd get about 75 people that's going to be here, and I mean, some weeks we've had over 500 on here, and we're going to continue it. I'll send you the schedule for the next few weeks of topics, but we plan on continuing it.
See, this again, if we bring it back to Reopen Eye Care, Dave, this could be something again that we put in the corner. You know, these are the upcoming conferences or discussions, etc.
Good point.
I thought this was a great format. I will request, I don't know if it'll be myself every week, but I will request somebody from my company be on the coffee talk. I think it really works well. I think it's very informative. I like the 2 next sessions look to be very, very interesting.
You know, David, hi, how are you?
Hey.
We also, all of these recordings, like this part may, chat at the end may get edited out, but then we put them all on YouTube. So we have them, and you know, half of them are business related, half of them are creative, you know, based on the, you know, independence and stuff. And those are just as inspiring and engaging as, you know, getting into the details of how to help your business and your practices. So these have been great. They're kind of
I like it. You know, again, you guys are all too young, except for West Coast Dave. So West Coast Dave, you remember Nightline when it started?
Yes, I do. Right after they discovered fire and made that wheel thing.
Nightline, which most of you guys probably don't know because I don't think it's on the air anymore. Nightline was something like that happened right after the Iranian students took over the U.S. Embassy in 1979. It became the after news. So news went on from 11 to 11:30. This is a little bit before CNN. And then 11:30, Ted Koppel came on, and all he did was 30 minutes of what's going on in Iran. And that went on, as we just said, the Iranian guy, you know, they freed the captives after, Reagan took office in 1980. And then everyone thought the show's done. But it was so popular. That's why I like this. It was so good that they kept the show on, and it was a top-rated news show for many, many years thereafter, probably at least 10. So I think you have something here. I think you have something.
We might be another Nightline. I'm ready.
I mean,
we've had some really, I mean, we've had people in tears on this discussions. A few weeks ago, we had Gay Garrardi from LEI Works, and you know, she was talking about starting her business in the 70s, and just saying, I mean, she said, if someone likes what we do, we'll do this again tomorrow. And 40 years later, you know, we're still opening up our doors, and you know, the passion and that comes out of some of these discussions are amazing.
I think it's hugely valuable. I think, you know, if you're running a practice in a small town and, you know, you're spending all your day refracting or managing it, your reality, you're very isolated, right? But you've got 25, 30,000 peers that are all going through the exact same thing. And by enabling them to crosstalk and share their experiences, and hey, here's how I dealt with it. Here is a question I asked. Here's a solution I tried. That's incredibly valuable, right? Because it breaks down that isolation and recognizes that it's this community. And it's very spontaneous and genuine and authentic, and it's great.
Well, guys, thank you so much for everything. I love the after party. I always love the after party. You know, but
By the way,
I'll send you,
by the way, do I assume these other people are not part of the after party?
oh yeah, they're here. They're listening in. They're listening in to the after party. So, but I'll send you the information for the next few weeks of Coffee Talks, and hope to see you guys on the 17th, especially.
Good. By the way, again, good job.
Yeah,
I
great
like
job.
this a lot. Good job.
Oh, thank you guys. Thank you. Good job to you all as well.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Adios.
All right. Bye now.
Bye-bye.